senator stands up in the chamber and says the other side isn't just wrong. They're enemies of the people, traitors, a threat to the country itself. Outside the building, a crowd is gathering. Some of them are armed. They have flags. They have a leader they love more than the law. They've been told the elections were stolen. The courts are rigged. The elites have sold them out, and they believe it because half of it is actually true.
A politician walks past the cameras and refuses to say whether he'll accept the result of the next vote. A famous commentator says on a podcast that millions of people listen to that maybe democracy was a mistake. Maybe what the country needs is a strong man who can just do things. The comments under the video are full of people agreeing.
We are told this is unprecedented, that nothing like this has ever happened to a country like ours. That part isn't true. The chaos is real. The strangeness is real. But the scene we're watching, somebody else has already played it out all the way to the end. We have the records. We know exactly how it went. Decade by decade, knife by knife, until the Republic was dead and nobody could quite remember when it had died. I'm going to walk you through it, and by the end of this video, the news is going to read differently to you. This is If It Happens Today. To understand how a republic dies, you have to understand what it looked like alive. The Roman Republic, at its best, was something close to a miracle. For about 400 years, longer than the United States has existed, Rome was governed by a system that, in theory, nobody could capture. Power was split between two consuls who served for a single year and then stepped down. There was a senate of around 300 men who debated and advised. There were popular assemblies where citizens voted. There were tribunes whose job was specifically to protect the common people from the powerful. The whole machine was designed around one obsessive fear, that one man would get too powerful and turn Rome back into a kingdom. The Romans had overthrown their last king around 509 BC, and they had developed an almost religious horror of monarchy. Rex, or king, was the dirtiest word in the Latin language. To prevent it, they built rules on top of rules, term limits, veto powers, a sacred boundary around the city, the pomerium, that no Roman general could cross with an army. You could be the greatest war hero in the Republic, but if you marched your legions over that line, you were a traitor, period. The system worked. It survived foreign invasions. It survived Hannibal, 15 years of an enemy army loose in Italy. Roman dead piled higher than anything America lost in Vietnam, and the Republic held. The institutions held. The men in charge stepped down when their year was up, even when they could have stayed. They went home and farmed. That was Rome at its best. And then around 133 BC, the Romans started killing each other in ways they had never killed each other before. And that's where this story actually begins. The death takes about 100 years, and the first crack is so small that almost nobody understands what they're seeing. The year is 133 BC. Rome has just finished conquering most of the Mediterranean world. The plunder is staggering, but the wealth is going to a tiny number of senatorial families who are using it to buy up enormous tracts of land. The small farmers, the citizen soldiers who had bled for Rome for centuries, are being pushed off their father's fields. They're drifting into the city, poor, furious, a powder keg with a slow fuse. Into this walks a young aristocrat named Tiberius Gracchus. Tiberius is everything the Roman elite produces: noble blood, war hero, grandson of one of the greatest generals of the previous generation. By every expectation, he should grow up to be another senator quietly defending the system that made his family rich. Instead, he gets himself elected as a tribune of the people, and he proposes something radical. Take some of the public land the rich have been hoarding for generations and give it back to the poor. The Senate loses its mind. Not because the law is illegal, but because Tiberius has figured out how to bypass them. He goes directly to the popular assembly. When another tribune tries to veto him, Tiberius has the man removed from office mid-term by popular vote. He doesn't break the law. He breaks the understanding about how things are done. He breaks the gentleman's agreement that had held Rome together for 400 years. The Senate is horrified, but they can't stop him. He's popular, so when he stands for re-election, another unprecedented act, the Senate stops trying to stop him through normal means. On the day of the election, a group of senators, led by Tiberius's own cousin, gathers in the Senate House. They wrap their togas around their left arms like shields. They break apart the wooden benches and arm themselves with the legs. Then they march out into the forum, find Tiberius, and beat him to death in the street. Around 300 of his supporters die with him, clubbed to death by the wealthiest men in Rome. The bodies are dragged to the Tiber River and thrown in, denied even the dignity of burial. A sitting Roman tribune, a man whose body was supposed to be sacred under Roman religious law, untouchable, protected by the gods themselves, has just been murdered by his fellow senators in broad daylight. And nothing happens. No one is prosecuted. The Senate retroactively decides it was fine. Life goes on. But something has changed. A line that had held for 400 years has just been crossed. And once a line like that is crossed, the next crossing is always easier. 10 years later, Tiberius's younger brother, Gaius, takes up the same cause. The Senate handles him the same way. Armed men hunt him through the streets of Rome until he orders his slave to kill him to avoid capture. 3,000 of his supporters are killed alongside him. Their property is seized. Their families are destroyed. 2 tribunes, brothers, murdered by their own government for proposing land reform. The Senate has now established a rule. When politics gets uncomfortable, violence works. For the next generation, Roman political life gets steadily uglier. Mobs in the forum, assassinations in broad daylight, show trials everyone knows are rigged. The Senate splits into 2 warring factions, optimates, who defend the old aristocracy, and populares, who claim to speak for the people. And each side starts to see the other not as opponents, but as existential threats. The speeches of the era describe political rivals using the same word Romans had always reserved for foreign enemies, hostes. Not opposition, not adversaries, enemies of the state. The other side isn't wrong. The other side is evil. The other side is something you eliminate. And then there was Sulla. Lucius Cornelius Sulla had just been given command of a major war in the east. Vast wealth and glory waiting for him. But while he's preparing to march out, his political enemies in Rome use a tribune to strip him of the command and hand it to a rival named Marius. Sulla is enraged. He's at his army's camp outside the city. He has 6 legions of veterans who are loyal to him personally. Not to Rome, not to the Senate, but to him, because he's the one who pays them and who promised them land. He asks his soldiers to march on Rome. Most of his officers refuse. They resign on the spot. They understand exactly what's being asked. They understand that the pomerium, the sacred bright line that is held for 400 years, is about to be crossed by a Roman general at the head of a Roman army for the first time in the history of the Republic. Sulla doesn't care. The soldiers don't care. They march. He takes the city. He kills his political opponents in the streets and posts their names on lists in the forum. Actual lists, nailed up in public, with rewards offered to anyone who brought in the head of anyone on the list. Their property went to the killer. Within weeks, ordinary Romans were murdering their neighbors for cash. Severed heads piled up on the rostra where senators had once given speeches, and the city got used to it. When Sulla was done, he laid down his dictatorship and went home, as if he had restored something rather than destroyed it. The republic he handed back wasn't the one he had marched on. Everyone had seen what was possible. The rules had never been laws, they had been agreements, and anyone with an army and the nerve could break them. Within 40 years, every ambitious Roman general knew this, and the next one to march on Rome would be a man named Julius Caesar. By the time Caesar crosses the Rubicon in 49 BC, marching his army toward Rome to seize power, almost nobody is shocked. They've seen it before. They've watched the Senate become a place where men give speeches that nobody listens to, while the real power is held by whoever has the biggest army and the loudest mob. The Republic doesn't end with a single dramatic event. It ends with a long, exhausting series of dramatic events that people slowly stop reacting to. The norms have been broken so many times that nobody can remember what the norms were. The institutions still exist. The Senate still meets. The consuls are still elected. but everyone knows they don't matter anymore. When Caesar is assassinated in 44 BC, stabbed 23 times on the floor of the Senate by men who had been his friends, his killers genuinely think they're saving the Republic. They've murdered a tyrant. The Republic will spring back to life now. It doesn't. There's another civil war, and another. And at the end of all of them, Caesar's adopted heir, a young man named Octavian, is the last man standing. Octavian is smarter than his adoptive father. He doesn't make Caesar's mistake. He doesn't call himself a king. He doesn't declare himself dictator for life. He keeps the Senate. He keeps the consuls. He keeps the elections. He keeps every single outward form of the Republic intact. He just makes sure that he controls all of it. The Senate votes the way he wants. The consuls do what he says. The elections produce the candidates he prefers. He takes a modest-sounding title, princeps, first citizen, accepts a few honors, and lets everyone tell themselves that the Republic still exists. It doesn't. He's an emperor in everything but name. Rome will be ruled by emperors for the next 500 years. There is no specific day on which the Republic dies. There is no announcement, no ceremony, no funeral. A child born in Rome in the year 30 BC would grow up under an emperor and die under an emperor, and might never have heard anyone call it that out loud. The forms remained. The substance was gone. By the time anyone fully realized the Republic was dead, it had been dead for decades. Now, step back from the story and look at the shape of it, because this isn't really a story about Rome. Rome is the costume. Underneath, it's a story about how republics actually die, and the mechanism is the same whether you're in the Forum or any modern capital. It starts with extreme inequality. A small number of families accumulate most of the wealth. The system that used to work for the middle and the bottom stops working for them. They get angry. They go looking for someone to blame and someone to follow. A populist leader rises who speaks to that anger. The populist starts bending the rules, not breaking the law, bending the norms, doing things that are technically allowed, but that nobody has ever done because everyone understood you weren't supposed to do them. The other side panics. They respond with their own escalations. Each side justifies what they're doing by pointing at what the other side did. They started it. The stakes are too high to play by the old rules. The country won't survive if we lose. The norms erode in both directions at once. Political violence enters the picture. At first, it's shocking. Then it happens again. Then often enough that people stop being shocked. A leader is shot at. A judge is threatened. A mob storms a building. The first time, the country holds its breath. The 5th time, it's a news cycle. The 10th time, it's a Tuesday. Each side stops seeing the other as fellow citizens with different views. They see hostis, enemies to be eliminated. Listen to how people talk about each other now. The vocabulary has already shifted. It happened so gradually, most of us didn't notice it. Strongman figures rise who promise to cut through the chaos. I alone can fix it. The system is rigged. Only I can save you. And large parts of the public, exhausted by the chaos and afraid of the other side, start to think maybe a strong leader wouldn't be so bad. Maybe the rules don't matter as much as we thought. The institutions are still there. The elections still happen. The legislatures still meet. But everyone slowly understands that the institutions don't really decide anything anymore. The real power lies elsewhere, with whoever has the loudest movement, the most loyal followers, the biggest media platform, the most willingness to break the things that used to be unbreakable. And then one day, without anyone quite noticing when, the Republic is gone. The forms remain, the elections still happen, the speeches still get made, but the substance is hollow. And by the time people realize, it's been gone for years. That's how the Roman Republic died. Now look at the country you live in. The extreme inequality. The leaders bending norms that used to be untouchable. The political violence. Still relatively rare, still shocking when it happens, but happening more often than it used to. The language of enemies and traitors replacing the language of opponents and colleagues. The strongmen promising to cut through the chaos. The exhausted citizens starting to wonder if the rules really matter as much as they used to think. We're not at the beginning of this story. We are somewhere in the middle of it. How far in is something historians will have to tell us years from now, looking back. The people who lived through the death of the Roman Republic mostly didn't know they were doing it. Cicero, one of the smartest, most politically engaged men of his entire era, wrote letters all the way through it. He saw the violence. He saw the strongman generals. He saw the norms breaking. And he kept thinking, almost to the end, that the Republic could be saved, that this was a bad patch, that if just one more reform passed, or one more reasonable man got elected, things would go back to normal. They never went back to normal. By the time Cicero figured out what had happened, the new regime had him killed. Soldiers caught him trying to flee the country, dragged him from his litter, and cut off his head. They cut off his hands too, the hands that had written the speeches against tyranny. Then they nailed all three to the rostra in the Forum, where Cicero had given speeches for 40 years. The wife of one of the men he had spoken against came down to look at the head. She pulled the tongue out of the mouth and stabbed it with her hairpin over and over until she got tired. The Republic Cicero loved had been dead for a while. He'd just been the last one to admit it. Here's what's worth knowing about the historical pattern. The republics that survived crises like this, and a few did, were the ones where enough people in enough places refused to accept that the old rules didn't matter anymore, where ordinary citizens kept showing up, where some leaders on every side stepped back from escalations even when they could have pressed forward, where the institutions were defended even by people who would have benefited from tearing them down. It is not inevitable. It has never been inevitable. The Roman Republic could have survived. At every critical moment, there were people who could have pulled it back from the edge. They didn't. Sometimes because they didn't see what was happening. Sometimes because they thought they could ride the wave. Sometimes because they were tired. Whether the same thing is happening to us right now is the question we are all going to spend the rest of our lives answering. This is what this channel does. We find the pattern. We use the past to see the present clearly. Because history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And once you can hear the rhyme, the news stops feeling random. It starts feeling like a song you've heard before. I'll see you in the next one.